In the last topic on coercion, I mentioned that most every value can be coerced to true or false. This idea that we test most any value for true or false is many times referred to as Truthy and Falsy. This concept is used throughout JavaScript code and is a critical part of any fundamental understanding. As you know, this concept relies on type coercion. So stated simply, a Truthy value is any value that is coerced to a true when used in a conditional. A Falsy value is anything that is coerced to false. First, let me share a bit of my early experience with JavaScript by showing you an example. And this will help illustrate the value of Truthy and Falsy. Here I have a bit of code. I've declared a new variable, but I haven't assigned a value to it. And then there's a lot of application code. Let's just assume that this is declared at the top of the code. And then later on, as a part of the code, we need to check to see if some value has been assigned to this variable. So when I was first learning JavaScript, this is how I would do it. This was many years ago, obviously, but I would check to see if the variable was not equal to undefined, and if it's not equal to null, and if it's not equal to an empty string. By checking those three things, I could then be certain that a value has been assigned to it, and then I could do something based upon that. Otherwise, I would know nothing has been assigned to that variable yet. No value has been assigned, and I would respond accordingly. Now this works fine, but this is a lot of typing, especially when we can get by using Truthy and Falsy. We can get by with a simple conditional like that. We simply do a conditional on the value. And JavaScript will coerce that value to a true or a false. But in order to rely on this, we need to know what values coerce to true and what values coerce to false. Well, the easiest thing to do is just to remember those that are Falsy values. Because there are a few Falsy values in JavaScript, the rest are Truthy values. So let's look at the Falsy values really quick. First off, false. Obviously, false is a Falsy value. Null is a Falsy value. Undefined is a Falsy value. The number 0 is a Falsy value, and the big int 0n is a Falsy value as well. We're going to be talking about big int a little bit later. But just remember that 0 represented both these ways are Falsy values. A negative 0 is a Falsy value. So if a negative 0 is used for a very small number that's a negative, that would be a Falsy value as well. NaN, that is a Falsy value. So if NaN is returned for something that is determined as not a number, NaN is a Falsy value. An empty string is a Falsy value. So those are our Falsy values. That's all of them. That's all we have to remember. The rest are Truthy values. They will evaluate to a true. So let's go back to our example. Now I've removed a lot of code here. Let's see how it works. Let's go ahead and take a look at the console, see which one displays. I can do something with this code because it has a value, or the variable has no value. And we're getting the variable has no value. And I just realized I spelled that wrong. So that works really well for us using Truthy and Falsy in this way. It makes our code much simpler. Now let's say that later on, somewhere inside the application code, something was assigned to this. Let's go ahead and assign, I'm just going to assign my name, so a string like that. Now that value is converted to a true, and so we can do something with that code. That's a console log statement that we get. So it's no longer Falsy because it's not undefined anymore, An undefined, remember, is a falsy value. It now has something in it, and so it evaluates to true. Now let's say a little bit later in the code, I wanted to indicate that this variable should have no value again. Now remember what I recommend. When you do that, don't set it to undefined, set it to null. Null communicates that you, the programmer, set this variable. Undefined communicates that the system has set undefined because nothing has been defined for that variable yet. So we're going to set that to null. Once again, the variable has no value. And so that's working for us. This is working really well to use this truthy and falsy value. However, I need to mention a gotcha with this before we end this topic. If the value assigned to this, or that could be assigned to this somewhere in the application code, could be a falsy value, then you don't want to use this technique. Let's say, for example, we're working with numbers, and it's possible that at some point in the code, a 0 were assigned to it. Well, there's something assigned to it, but that's a falsy value. 0 is a falsy value. And so it's going to log to the console, the variable has no value. If I save that, I don't know why I haven't resized this just so we can look at it. The variable has no value. So that's a gotcha that you need to be aware of, that you need to be careful about. Remember those falsy values, and remember that everything else is a truthy value. Now, in order to appropriately use this falsy and truthy concept in JavaScript, there's one more thing I want to show you. You need to understand some of the truthy values that you may not expect. So we have our falsy values here, but let's look at some truthy values that you may not think are truthy. An empty object. Nothing is inside an object. It is still truthy. An empty array. That is a truthy value as well. That will coerce to true. And finally, any negative number will coerce to true. Negative numbers are truthy. So those are 3 truthy values that you might not expect and you should be aware of. But truthy and falsy are used throughout JavaScript code. You'll see it frequently. So very critical concept. All right, let's move on.